I had a relationship with my brother-in-law, and you won't believe what happened in the end. It all happened on the day I'd had a fight with my wife, and to drown my sorrows, I went to the bar to drink. That's how I felt as I stared at the glass of whiskey I held in my hands, my gaze lost in the golden reflection of the drink. The bar was quiet, a typical place, located in the heart of Hillside. Those dark wooden walls, the muffled sound of voices and laughter, and the smell of cigarettes mixed with the fried chicken coming out of the kitchen. A place without pretension, where people came just to forget, if only for a few hours, the tiresome routine of their lives. Emma and I hadn't been the same for months, maybe even longer, but I refused to admit it. Our house, which used to be filled with laughter and long conversations until the early hours of the morning, was now filled with silence. The silence that only a crumbling relationship can provide. I was lost in my own thoughts, looking at the same old places and wondering when it all started to fall apart. When was it that, instead of hugging each other at the end of the day, we started to simply walk past each other as if we were two strangers? That's why I was there, in the bar, trying to drown my frustrations and doubts. The whiskey was strong, but the feeling of relief wasn't coming, and what bothered me most was knowing that Emma was at home, alone, her eyes tired from trying so hard, while I was sinking into this spiral of indecision. When the door to the bar opened, a cool wind cut through the humidity, and the dim light from the street briefly illuminated the scene. A man entered, and I saw him before I even heard him. It was Cole, my brother-in-law. He always had that effect on people, as if his presence was a silent storm, but somehow comforting. He was 28, a few years younger than me, but there was something about him that made me feel that he knew more than he should for someone so young. Maybe it was the way he looked at things, or how somehow he had this unflappable calm that seemed to be missing from everyone else around me. He looked around, quickly finding a seat at the counter, and as luck would have it, the seat next to me was empty. It wasn't long before he approached. I didn't see him often, but in recent months our conversations had become more common. I don't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing, but words always seemed to flow more easily between us than between Emma and me. "I didn't expect to see you here, Billy," he said, smiling as he sat down. His voice was low, calm, but there was something defiant about it, as if he already knew what I was thinking. I forced a smile and shrugged. I needed some time to myself. Cole ordered a beer, and for a moment, we stood there saying nothing, our eyes fixed on the monitor screen broadcasting a basketball game. But I knew the tension between us was in the air. He always had this way of making me feel like I was being analyzed, but at the same time, he gave me space to speak when I wanted to. And at that moment, I wanted to talk. I wanted to explode, to tell him about the frustration of my marriage, but I also knew that I couldn't. The last thing I wanted was to involve him in my problems. "How's your life, Billy?" he asked, breaking the silence. And although the question was simple, there was something in his tone that suggested he already knew the answer. I took a deep breath. "Emma and we're not doing well. It's been difficult." Cole looked at me for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if he was searching for something in my expression. I'd never known exactly what he saw in me, but I knew he could see what no one else could. I was so used to hiding everything, to keeping up appearances, that this transparency made me feel vulnerable. He smiled again, this time with a touch of understanding. "You've always been so quiet, Billy. I think it just consumes you. It shouldn't be like this." Those words curled up inside me, like a tight knot in my throat. It was true. I was consumed. And worse, I felt lost, like I was being swallowed up by guilt. I didn't know how to resolve it, how to find a way out. But I knew that Emma was still trying. And worst of all, I didn't know if I wanted to try either. The conversation dragged on, with Cole asking me questions, but not pressing. He had always known how to be kind and patient, something I had never been. But at the same time, something was in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The tension between us was growing, like an electric current that could jump at any moment. As the night dragged on into the early hours of the morning, the sky outside the bar was overcast, and the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm seemed to be approaching rapidly, and the bar began to empty. When Cole got up to leave, I hesitated. "I can give you a ride home if you want," I offered, trying to sound casual. I knew he lived near where I did, but the mood of the evening seemed to be pushing us towards something else, something undefined. Perhaps the storm was affecting me more than I wanted to admit. He looked at me, as if pondering the offer, and then nodded. I think it would be good. The rain is getting heavy outside. We left the bar and walked to my car. The rain soon turned into a real storm. I could barely see the road, and the sound of the drops hitting the glass increased, creating a feeling of claustrophobia. The wind made the trees sway violently, as if nature was trying to trap us there. I didn't know what was going on inside me. I only knew that tension, discomfort, and perhaps a certain need for closeness were building up. The journey to Cole's house was becoming a test of patience, and at the same time, an opportunity that I didn't know if I should take. The silence inside the car was heavy, almost suffocating. Everything was about to change, but I still didn't know how. The sound of the rain hitting the windshield of the car was almost hypnotic. Every drop that fell seemed to resonate in my mind, as if trying to force me to think, to reflect. The glass was fogged up, and I tried to wipe it off with my shirt sleeve, but soon the sweat and heat from inside the car made everything cloudy again. I felt like that too, fogged up, unable to see properly what was going on inside me. I was sitting in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, but I didn't know why. I didn't know if it was fear of the unknown or a feeling I was trying to ignore. Next to me, Cole was quiet, staring out of the window, his hair mussed by the breeze coming in through the gap in the window. He seemed calm, but something in his silence made me feel that he was also aware of the tension in the air. It was as if the two of them were in an emotional minefield, and no one dared make the first move. The road was deserted. The town of Hillside was small, and few people went out when the rain intensified. The streetlights, reflecting in the puddle of water, were blurred, as if the world was distorted, creating a sense of separation. We were no longer part of that place. We were isolated, just me and him, and whatever was about to happen. There was something else, something in the way he occupied the space. The smell of his cologne mixed with the humidity in the air, the way he held his seatbelt with one hand, the unpretentious way his shirt was still half unbuttoned. It was as if he wasn't worried about anything, not the consequences, not what else was happening there. "Are you all right?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made me look at him more closely. I don't know if he noticed, but at that moment, it felt like he was analyzing me in a much deeper way than anyone should analyze someone. The answer that came to mind was simple. No, but I didn't say that. Instead, I took a deep breath and gave a humorless smile. Yes, just, you need to get through this rain. If you're enjoying it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. The ending is amazing. I tried to cling to normality, to the comfortable lie that everything was fine, but inside, I knew I was about to lose control. Emma was at home, alone, and I was here, in the car, with her brother. And what did that mean? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. But something inside me was pulling me towards a dark and unknown place. The rain increased in intensity. The drops hammered hard against the glass, and the distant thunder gave the impression that the sky was about to collapse on us. The car swayed slightly in the wind, and the feeling of being trapped, confined, grew by the second. "You're tense, Billy," said Cole as calmly as ever. But there was something different about the way he said it, a slight emphasis that made me realize how much he was watching my every move. I was tense, more than I realized. My hands were sweating, my chest tight, and the simple act of breathing seemed to be an effort. I wasn't just physically uncomfortable. There was something more. I forced myself to laugh out loud. "It's the rain. I've never really liked storms." "It's not the rain," he replied. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment there was a silence so dense that it seemed as if time itself was dragging on. "You're trying to avoid something." I swallowed. I was speechless. He was right. I was avoiding. I was avoiding looking inside myself, avoiding realizing that there was something going on between us. Something I couldn't name, but which gave me a strange feeling in my stomach, a discomfort that was growing with every passing minute. Cole took a deep breath, then made a movement as if he was going to lean back in his seat, but stopped and looked at me again. His eyes were deep, observant, as if he was seeing something I didn't want to reveal. The silence between us stretched, and the more he looked at me, the more the pressure increased. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to, Billy," he finally said, and his voice was soft, almost like an invitation. "But if you want to, it might be easier." I knew what he was suggesting. They weren't just empty words. I could feel the intention behind them, like a thread being pulled tighter and tighter. He was challenging me to look inside, to confront what was happening. But I didn't know if I was ready for that. That's when he did something that took me by surprise. Cole slowly slid his hand across the car seat until it touched mine, with a lightness that, in my mind, seemed almost unrecognizable. His touch was soft but firm, as if it wasn't something spontaneous but a decision, a calculated gesture. I froze. I didn't know what to do. The warmth of his hand, the unexpected touch, made my heart race. "Billy." He whispered my name, and I didn't know what was happening, but I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. My mind was on fire. The heat of the moment, the closeness of him, the repressed desire I didn't know I had, it all blended together in a way that was impossible to separate. And for an instant, I stopped being me. I stopped being Emma's husband. I stopped being who I thought I was. I looked at Cole, and when our gazes met, something inside me just broke. Something I didn't know existed. Something that I knew, when touched, would change everything. Cole's touch was light, but it had an implicit force. He wasn't expecting me to do anything, but his presence seemed to pull me towards something I didn't understand. I felt the weight of his hand on mine, the pressure of his fingers, as if he were inviting me to cross an invisible line. "You knew this would happen, Billy," he finally said, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. His eyes were fixed on mine, and his expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't decipher. He knew, and it made me feel like I was being watched all the time. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything that was happening. My mind was a mess. Emma, Cole, the rain, the muffled sound of thunder outside. I was in an emotional turmoil, lost in something I didn't want, but which at the same time was drawing me in with an irresistible force. "I've never done this before, Cole," I muttered, trying to hold myself together. But the truth was that I couldn't keep my distance any longer. There was something in me that was giving way, something that was slowly breaking. Every second I spent in that car seemed to push me into an abyss from which I couldn't escape. Cole moved a little closer, his presence becoming more intense, almost palpable. I could smell him, the light scent of his deodorant mixed with the smell of rain and wind. Something in his gaze made my stomach clench, and it was as if he knew exactly what I was feeling. "You don't have to hide from me," he said, his voice almost too soft. "I can see you, Billy. I know what's going on, and it's okay." Those words hit me with an unexpected weight. I didn't know what to make of it. It was as if he was ripping the veil off my soul and forcing me to face a truth that I had kept well guarded. The repressed desire, the confusion, the anger, it was all there exposed, and now there was no turning back. Not knowing how to react, I looked at his hands, still on mine. It was a simple thing, but at that moment it seemed to be the most significant thing in the world. The warmth of his fingers seemed to melt me, and the way he watched me, unhurried, in no hurry to force me into anything, made me feel as if I was being taken, unwillingly, to a place where I could no longer resist. The car swayed slightly in the strong wind, and I felt my body involuntarily move closer to him. Our faces were closer now, the space between us almost non-existent. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to back away, but my mind was so confused, so intoxicated by everything that was happening, that the last thing I wanted to do was get out of there. "Billy," Cole said again, this time with a more serious tone, almost as if he was challenging me. He touched my face gently with his other hand, and something in me, some remnant of resistance, broke. "I'm not going to judge you, but you have to stop denying what's happening." Those words hit me like a blow. I knew he was right. I knew that something was happening between us, something that deep down had always been there. I just never wanted to see it. And what was happening now, what the tension between us was creating, could no longer be denied. Before I knew what was happening, Cole leaned forward even more, and then without another word, he did what I hadn't known how to do. He kissed me. The kiss was soft at first, almost hesitant, as if he wanted to make sure I didn't push him away. But the tension that had been building up between the two of us since the moment he walked into the bar suddenly exploded. The kiss deepened, and I felt my hands accidentally move to his body. I no longer knew where my skin ended and his began. The world around us disappeared. All that existed at that moment was the touch of his hands, the warmth of his body against mine, the urgency of what we were doing, and the certainty that there was no turning back. The car was now immersed in a heavy silence, the rain falling even harder, but it didn't matter to us. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging inside me. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew I was cheating on Emma, my wife, with her brother, but deep down, something in me refused to stop. Something in me was telling me to go deeper, to explore this need, this attraction that I had been trying to hide, this feeling that I had been repressing for years. And so, as the storm outside intensified, the storm inside me became immeasurable. I no longer knew who I was, where my guilt began and my desire ended. But one thing was certain. At that moment, I was lost, and perhaps, somehow, I would never find myself again. The car was stopped, but I couldn't do it. The weight of guilt pressed down on my chest, while the rain beat heavily against the glass. I was caught up in a whirlwind of feelings, not knowing what to do. What was I doing? Cole was standing next to me, quiet, but his presence seemed to take up all the space. He looked at me with that disconcerting calm, as if he knew what was going on inside me, while I could barely breathe. "I know what you're feeling," he said with a quiet smile. His words, always precise, made me want to resist, but at the same time, I couldn't. Everything inside me was conflicted. Everything inside me was in conflict, as if I was being dragged to a place I didn't know how to get back from. "You don't have to think about her now," Cole replied, with a serenity that disconcerted me. "This moment is ours alone." I was beginning to understand that there was no going back. I didn't know what that meant for me, but I knew that, at that moment, I was no longer the same person. I was lost between guilt and desire, between confusion and the need to understand what had happened. I wanted to leave. I wanted to stop feeling this pressure, but Cole's words, his hands near me, made it all a matter of time. The storm outside no longer mattered. What I felt now was something I could no longer deny. I knew that when the rain passed, everything would be different, and I didn't know if I was ready to deal with it. We never got back together, but it became our secret. Every time we saw each other, we exchanged glances, that look of only those who know what happened. "What do you think I should do?" I'd like to have a relationship with him again, to feel the feelings I felt that night, but I'm afraid my wife will find out. Leave your opinions in the comments. It will help me a lot to give direction to my future. And if you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos.